and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove, and sitting across the wooden table from me is the next president of the US Soccer Federation. His name is Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello. Oh, yes, and that one. I will take that title. That's fine with me. Do you get to award that now? No more elections? Just I'm the new president?
Well, only if I can be co-president.
Deal.
Okay. Let's shake on it.
It was a genuine moment of pause, but yeah, I'm cool with it.
All right, so today's show is, we've been promising this for a couple of weeks. Today's show is all our suggestions for how to fix US soccer. So if Taylor and I were elected co-president on a joint ticket, right, no VPP, right, this is a joint ticket. Here are the things we would do to try and improve and fix US soccer.
It says something about me that I'm already plotting my silent coup.
We have a Romulus and Remus situation bubbling away here.
Bye, Remus.
So, worth pointing out at the top of the show, we know that we actually aren't smart enough to fix US soccer. We don't actually believe that we have all the answers. I think that's worth saying, right?
That's the type of thinking that gets you to be the victim of a coup. That's all I'm saying.
But we do have like some interesting ideas, some innovative ideas, some obvious ideas, and some we'll explore in more detail later on. This is like a conversation starter. We're just going to fire some things out, some possible fixes when you vote Grove Rockwell / Rockwell Grove 2018.
And view behind the curtain is that we've been having this conversation over the last week, maybe 10 days or so.
As I'm sure many people have, right? I'd change this, I'd change this.
But also just specifically about how do we structure this? Because I think you and I have come around to certain ideas that in the past we weren't all about, or we want to explore more in depth. But then it's like, do you do individual shows about that? Do you talk about it all at once? Do you try to research everything? And that's just too much of an undertaking. So I think, but we want to get the ball rolling.
Yes.
So we want to throw out some ideas, get the conversation going, and then maybe spend over the next month or 2 months or whatever, kind of looking more in depth at some possible solutions, some possible ideas.
With some experts on each thing.
That would be ideal.
Because it is worth saying, I think in the past, we've been small c conservative in terms of like, maybe don't change too much because American soccer is making slow but sure progress. And obviously the recent unpleasantness is, I think, what we've decided to call it, of not qualifying for the World Cup, if you want to name it, has made us be more willing to shake up the system and try some new things.
Yes.
Right? Okay, without like referencing anything specific. All right, so should we get to it?
Sure.
Right. First meeting of co-presidents.
Yeah.
What's our plan of action? I think we've got about 10 things each, but we're going to end up with even more. I invite you to start.
All right. I'll start by saying, I think if I were to be the new U.S. soccer president, I think the first thing to recognize is like, we got knocked down. And I think that that's not something Americans like to do. I think we don't always enjoy admitting, this was a mistake. Yeah, we got beat here. Yeah, we lost this one. Like, we struggle with that.
You're talking humility here?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit humility, but it's also just a little bit like recognizing that sometimes you can't be the best. And like, I think it's this duality that Americans have specifically about soccer of like, we recognize that we're not the best in the world and we're not close to being the best in the world, but we also think we should be. And I think that you have to recognize like, this was a failing. We didn't qualify for the World Cup. Things are not the way they need to be. But we're going to learn our lesson from it. We're going to emerge even stronger and better than we ever have before.
We're not going to say to Trinidad, we're going to challenge you to a basketball match and we'll see who's best at that.
Exactly.
Right?
No, but with that, like, I want it to be more than just a platitude. Like, and we talked about Josie Altidor's apology and that I wasn't so satisfied with it. And part of it was that it felt to me sort of like, we apologize, we should have done better, we let you down, but we're going to be stronger, we're going to be better, we're going to be faster, we're going to be great, we're going to be there next time, don't worry. And I am worried. And so I feel like for me it needs to be more like, look, things are not right. We got to fix it. We got to make it work. It was more than just hitting a post when we should have scored the goal or whatever Sunil
It was
said.
Being in the situation where we had to not hit the post, right? Like the fact that like Clint Dempsey should have been able to hit a post late in a Trinidad game and it shouldn't have mattered because we should have already been qualified.
Yes.
Put it that way.
And
all right, so does this translate into an actual plan of action, or is it just a more genuine, like everyone should be a bit more humble?
I guess yes and yes, basically. Like it needs to be number one, like I think we need a U.S. soccer president who can say, things aren't great and we want to fix them. Like that, it's acknowledging that there's a problem is the first step. I think the second thing then is how do you go about...
You meant co-president, I'm sure.
Excuse me. Yes, excuse me. Then we have to figure out like what needs to be fixed and how do you fix it and what are the possible, causes and effects, essentially. So what I would like to do is almost, my like goofy idea is almost like a Shark Tank-a-thon, like a pitch-a-thon, where it's just basically...
I like Shark Tank-a-thon.
Where we essentially have like, you have like a week-long seminar or summit with like former coaches from all around the world, former FA heads, managers, players, journalists, whomever, and you sort of have like say you are, for example, Ted, who really thinks that there should be pro-rel.
Yeah.
Like, you could have him come in and present how he thinks it should work or why it needs to be. Why, if you have somebody who feels really passionate about the salary cap, or like you can basically just have people come in, present their idea for what is a problem, and then you have this kind of sage group of elders who can look at that and be like, we don't really need to deal with that. That's not feasible. We'll fix that.
What you're describing is the John McCain approved old-fashioned version of Senate hearings, right? When the Senate is working on legislation, they will have experts come and talk to committees about their expertise, with the idea being that, the Senate, the senators are sort of the old wise heads, but not necessarily experts in X subject. You bring in experts in X subject.
Yeah,
okay, that's interesting.
I think so. Just because what we need to do then, if you're establishing that,
so self-reflection is what you're talking about. Yeah,
exactly. That things are bad and some things need to be fixed, but we also want to open it up to like, what do you think needs to be fixed? And you're going to get some people who say, oh, Americans need to eat less salt before soccer games. It dehydrates them. And we're not going to really worry about that one. But there's going to be other ones. But you want to have people feeling heard, feeling incorporated, and feeling like, okay, there's like a multi-pronged approach to dealing with the situation as it is, and hopefully that will help rectify some things.
Okay, so I want to translate these into like sort of concrete actions if we can. So would you do this just once, like when we sort of gavel in our first session as co-president, or would this be every 6 months, or like a regular thing where we have constant self-reflection?
I think the initial one would be to get a sort of guiding principle established. So at the end of this pitch-a-thon, the Shark Tank-a-thon, maybe it is like, okay, we've established that like it is a big problem that we don't have relegation promotion in the country as it stands. We have a salary cap that isn't working. We have this that doesn't work. These 8 things need to be addressed, or we need to look at them in more depth to figure out how we can go about changing this or
so that's the first
evolving.
one.
So that's the first step. I think that's what it is for me right now, is sort of getting some sort of framework in place.
Can I add on that then maybe we revisit it every year or 6 months? Like you have sort of maybe a smaller version than the first big one.
Yeah.
You revisit it every year to see, have we made progress on this? What are the new problems that have arisen? Because sometimes fixes create new problems, right? So then you would constantly be examining what you're doing and trying to fix it for the future.
Yeah. And I want to say...
I'll say this, the future never arrives. All you can do is keep trying to make things better.
Well, okay,
right?
and I want to say that, like, to that point, though, because you're right. It also... I think, to go back to my initial point, like, Americans don't like failing. We really don't. No one likes failing, obviously, unless you're like a masochist, and even then that's sort of different. But but nobody wants to say like, yeah, this didn't work or this isn't going to work. And I think you kind of have to be willing to say like, yeah, this might fail, but we've got to try some stuff. Because
do you know the Samuel Beckett phrase? Not Quantum Leap, actual Samuel Beckett. His phrase is fail better.
Yeah.
Right. That's the thing, is you never really succeed. All you do is just keep failing, keep learning.
Yeah.
Because if you have like a Project 2010, which is like, we're going to win the World Cup by 2010, then it looks kind of silly when you don't, right? But if you just have a thing of like constantly trying to improve and accepting that you're never going to be like 5-time back-to-back World Cup champion, because no one ever is, because other countries are trying to improve, you're ultimately going to fail somewhere, so fail better.
Yeah. That was
the
full
full Samuel Beckett quote.
That was it, of course. But that is true. But also what I mean is more so like, say you and I are locked in a debate about the United States primary away jersey should be, you say blue and I say red.
Yeah.
And we just go back and forth, and we each have studies and we each have arguments, and red teams win more, but blue teams win better or whatever. Like, at a certain point, you've kind of done all the research, you've gotten to a point where everybody knows the arguments, and now you're just on different sides. But nobody wants to jump because nobody wants to be wrong and nobody wants to concede. And I feel like that leads to a lack of compromise and a lack of working together. And you kind of have to be okay with being like, look, relegation and promotion might be unsuccessful, but what we have right now isn't working either. We got to try it. Okay. Let's take that jump and not be afraid.
All right, but you're mostly talking about a mindset change at US Soccer, right? Which is part of this whole thing. All right, can I move us on? So the correct answer is to have purple jerseys?
Yes, I think so.
Blend red and blue?
Yes, and just so you know, because I don't want you to be too concerned, Dale Grove, that is my biggest sort of overarching, non-specific change I would make. So I promise you that the rest are a little bit more to point.
You can read the look on my face, right?
Yeah. So, like, oh boy, we are on a time crunch, and he just spent 45 minutes talking about red versus blue.
Okay, so to the jersey point, here's the thing I would do. My idea is smaller, but I think interesting. I would have fan input to designing the next U.S. national team jerseys.
Do you know why you and I are meant to be co-presidents, Daryl?
Why is that?
Because we have a similar idea.
Okay, all right. So I would, instead of just like farming it out to Nike, letting them sort of give the weird template version of the jersey that they keep doing, right?
Yeah, this
and
one worked for Portugal, so it'll work for you guys.
Just change the colours and send it to the United States.
Or don't change the colour.
That's with the England jersey. Send it out. There's so many. Weirdly, I think soccer fans in the US tend to be kind of graphic designery. I feel like if you look at the percentage of soccer fans that we know, a large amount of them are graphic designers. It seems to attract that crowd. There's a lot of talent out there that would be willing to submit ideas for jersey designs to US soccer and to Nike. And I think the US should kind of open source it, take the best ideas, have a liaison with Nike, obviously, and then come together to bring that design to life.
Yep.
Yeah. So just a bit more fan involvement, and it's not just that it would be a more fun process than just being shown the jersey that Nike says you have to wear. It's also, it would represent something of US soccer saying, we want fans not just involved in a token way, but actually involved in what the US national team wears and looks like, and you're more absorbed into the process. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my whole point.
Well, because it also reflects what fans want and what fans are interested in and kind of the designs they appreciate, as opposed to this one is the kind of general theme that Nike's going for this specific World Cup. I would add, I want to rebrand that crest. And I want to say that because we just did that. I think they did it right before the Copa America Centenario, which was okay but not great. World Cup qualifying didn't go so great. I think I want to change it again and sort of specifically, again, acknowledge this is the superficial aspect of it. Things aren't great. Things need to change. It starts with the way the team looks. So, new jerseys designed by fans, new crest maybe also designed by fans. You kind of change it up a little bit, and you make it very clear on a superficial icon level, things are changing.
So I like the new US soccer crest.
I like it a lot.
But things have been very bad.
They have.
It's it represents a very bad era ever since we've had this crest. And I kind of like the idea of saying, it's going to cost us some money, but let's say, all right, this crest represents being beaten 4-0 by Argentina at the Copa America semi-final and then not qualifying for the World Cup. Let's call that the era of that crest, which is obviously cursed. And let's start with a new non-cursed crest.
And we're going to hear from people saying, well, but making it to the semifinals of Copa America Centenario, that's good. We won the Gold Cup. That's good. But I would even say the things you mentioned are very bad, worse than the good things. And then also you just look at the way the soccer community has been in this country with the kind of continued employment of Jurgen Klinsmann, then the firing of Jurgen Klinsmann, the appointment of Bruce Arena, then the failed World Cup qualifying campaign. It just seems very fractured, and people are very opinionated and kind of against each other, and I feel like it could use some harmonious unification.
I don't think you know about this. We talked yesterday about Dave Sarakin being named the guy who's going to guide the US
guider
through the next the next game against Portugal. Someone, Jonathan Falo, I think, pointed out to us that Jeff Cameron's tweet, a few minutes after that was announced, was a series of emojis that were the crying emoji and the head scratching emoji and the laughing emoji.
Oh boy.
So it seems like, unless we're misreading that, I don't think we are, there is discord within the ranks of American soccer. And I think some of these more touchy-feely ideas, I'm going to say, in terms of bringing fans in to design things and all that, it's all part of sort of bringing harmony back to American soccer and to US soccer. Fair? Okay.
Yeah.
How many points have we made so far? I'm going to try and keep track of these so I can title the show correctly.
Are we counting rebrand the crest and have fan input for the design as two different things?
I'm saying
or one
three.
Thing?
I'm saying three different
things.
things.
So we're at 3 right now.
Okay. What else you got?
So I feel like I talked a little bit about the rebrand the crest. Do you mind if I continue?
Go for it.
All right. Then I am going to say, I'm not going to go specific here because this is the big one that kind of made me not want to do this show, but I'm going to say the foundation, or at least the possible foundation for relegation promotion, needs to be poured.
I've got ProRel and then an arrow, do it.
Yep.
But sponsored by Nike. Just do it. ProRel in the United States.
And again, this goes back to my first of all, that's great. Second of all, this goes back to the idea of you kind of need a board or a group of advisors to say okay, this is the plan for how we're going to do relegation promotion, because there are lots of pitfalls and lots of plans that have been proposed and counters to those plans and whatever else. And so I don't think if you're the U.S. soccer president, if we were elected U.S. soccer president,
when
I feel like we need to clarify that we're not actually running. But anyway, that what is key is the person who's in charge saying, look, this is the vision we're moving towards, and then we're going to figure out how that vision's going to take place.
Yeah, okay.
Or how we can make that happen. And I think so you need the president to say relegation promotion is the system that we need.
Can we have him say promotion relegation? I feel like it's weird when you say relegation.
Fine, promotion relegation.
Yeah, glass is half full.
That's probably the better way to be. I forgot about having this conversation on yesterday's show.
So maybe the details of how we implement promotion relegation, I think that's a whole other show.
Yep.
Where you and I could maybe say, if we were to implement ProRel, here's a realistic timeline and process and way it could be done. Maybe let's do that in a couple of weeks, right? So we've got time to work on it and think about it. But can we ask this question?
Yeah.
What would be the benefits of promotion relegation?
I really do buy into the idea that it creates more enthusiasm at a local level. So here in Richmond,
because Detroit City FC could be thinking, we're going all the way to the top, baby.
I mean, or at least it gives you that idea. Because I've had
just like they did to the music charts.
Yeah, exactly. For a while. Yeah. But I've had like people who I've met abroad or who come here to visit, and like I've taken them to Kickers games, and they've said like, oh, so if they win the league, because at the time they were like top of the league, and it was like, oh, if they win, do they move to MLS? It was like, no, and that leads to long conversations about like why, but wouldn't you be more interested? And it just seems like,
did you explain that it wasn't your choice?
Yeah, but I think it's just such a foreign idea that we don't have that to a lot of people. Especially this was when I was like 14.
All right, but impressing foreigners isn't enough reason to do it.
But it's more about the idea that like if you bring someone to a Kickers game and say this team could potentially be playing in Major League Soccer, I think more people show up. And especially if they put together a decent team with that idea in mind, I think more players would want to play in, say, USL if there is an outside chance that they could make it to Major League Soccer someday.
Without taking us too far down this road, I think the other version of this is that maybe there are more teams with more investment at a lower level because there's a big sort of carrot at the end, which is promotion all the way to the top division, and that creates more opportunities for younger players to have professional careers.
Yeah,
right.
100%.
That's the best possible version of this.
And I think that the counter you hear a lot of the time is like, yeah, but you need something in place to like make sure that like clubs stay afloat and don't spend more than they can afford.
This is my word. The reason I've been resistant to like just going all in on ProRel now is I am still kind of concerned that the actual foundations of American soccer might not be strong enough to take it, and I think that there might be a lot of casualties along the way. But I'm also weirdly, I think just the failure to qualify for the World Cup has made me more willing to sort of, let's just shake the foundations and see what happens.
Yeah. But I would also say that I feel like some of that concern is rooted in the idea of like, say we found out that like there was like this theory that gravity didn't exist is the best way I'm going to go with this one. I know.
But it was like a flat earth.
But it was
theory.
Like people were like, no, but there was like an intentional effort to disprove gravity that maybe it was like, oh, maybe gravity doesn't exist. But if all of your arguments were like, no, but gravity exists, then it's like, we're never going to go further than that because it's based in this idea.
I mean, I'd be pulling out apples pretty fast.
Yeah, okay. Bad example. But you get what I'm getting at. Well, maybe you don't, but maybe you will in a second. When I'm trying to say that, like, but I feel like that argument of, but what if a team fails and then what does that mean for the league? That's still, I think, rooted in the idea of, like, single entity. What happens if one of the NFL franchises fails? Well, that would be terrible for the league, but like that happens sometimes in England. Teams overspend or can't stay profitable, and they go down a tier or they cease to exist, but other teams fill that void. And it's sort of...
It nearly happened to Wolves in the 80s.
And it kind of happened to Portsmouth, although they're back to some extent, but it's still, it's survival of the fittest. And what we have right now is sort of...
Survival of the fattest.
Survival of the fattest, exactly. And so I look at, like, in the NBA, I think it was...
The MLS all-you-can-eat buffet.
Yeah. But in the NBA, I think the New Orleans franchise, before they were the Pelicans, I think when they were still the New Orleans Hornets, I believe that they didn't have an owner, and it was just the league had to like take over and kind of shepherd them along.
That happened to Chivas USA for a while, right?
Yeah, and I think that doesn't look good for a league to have to sort of like prop up one of your organizations, and it sometimes makes sense to just be like, all right, this isn't working, but another team is going to take their place.
All right, so I'm going to move us on to another point then, which is sort of uncoupling the US soccer MLS thing.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the thing that you have to do as president is with ProRel as one of the goals, but also in more general things maybe, US soccer has to sort of stop being a helicopter parent for MLS and maybe be more of a challenging parent in terms of like setting goals for, because really US soccer has authority over MLS because they control the divisional certification is the wrong word, but you know what I'm saying. They control what is a Division 1 league in the United States. Sanctioning, yes, that's the word. So you can say to MLS, we need you to do this or you're not going to be sanctioned Division 1. And obviously that's a huge risk, right? You might be bluffing it maybe. You might have to sort of get good at poker. But you can make MLS work harder in terms of playing more kids in MLS, like giving more chances to younger players. So basically US soccer could challenge MLS instead of holding its hand so much.
Yeah, and I think with that in mind, one of mine would be mess with the salary cap of Major League Soccer.
Ooh, okay.
Just mess with it.
What does that mean? Mess with it.
Well, it means that they've already done things here and there in a very MLS way of like, now we've got Gammon Tam and homegrown players don't count against it and DPs at a certain level and whatever. And so like we already kind of have that system where it's like, we're going to change it this way, we're going to change it that way. But I feel like that's only been like half measures and little patches. And what I'm saying is like, if your true aim is to be one of, if not, I believe Don Garber has said, the like premier competition in the world for soccer, you're not going to do that with a $3.845 million budget, or salary cap. That's not going to happen.
Well, here's actually. Sorry, am I cutting you off here?
Well, I was going to do as an example. I think it's Craig Cathcart who plays for Watford in the Premier League.
Yeah, went through the Man United Youth Academy.
Yes,
yeah,
is one of the
makes those work clothes.
He does. Are you doing Carhartt? I was like, see, but I wouldn't be surprised because he is one of the lowest paid players in all of the Premier League. He makes still a lot. Yeah. He makes £13,000 a week.
Oh, the poor guy.
Which translates to about $900,000 a year, which would make him a designated player in Major League Soccer. And I know that that's still the Premier League, which is an incredibly rich league. But it's worth noting that one of the worst paid players would be a designated player in the United States.
Or he would take all the Gammon Tam to get under the cap.
There it is. And so I feel like you can't have this aspiration of we're going to be a great league, but we're going to keep the salary cap low. And again, I feel like that's been an artificial creation because we've got to make sure that the clubs remain profitable. We don't want anybody going under. So we're going to make it that everybody kind of can be profitable to the extent possible.
All right, so this is maybe an extension of that point and the one before about US soccer challenging MLS instead of holding its hand. I would argue that based on, we had this conversation about the Jermaine Jones comments where he wants young players to sort of move, like grow up in Major League Soccer, then move over to Europe, right? Or go straight to Europe. But one of the ideas was to have US soccer tell MLS essentially the goal should not be to be the best league in the world because, wake up call, that's not going to happen, right? This is like the parent telling their kid, you're not going to sort of be, I don't know, I hate telling kids what they can't do, but you're not going to be a giraffe, right? You're a human, you're not going to be a giraffe.
Yep.
So instead, how about something more realistic, which is to be the best-selling league in the world. Be the best league at producing young talent and selling it on. Make that your goal. The league will be more popular, I think, in the long run for attempting that and being successful at it instead of attempting to be the league of big names and failing to do that.
Yes. And I've got...
achievable goals. Set achievable goals.
I like that. And I've got a point that goes, I believe, pretty much hand in hand with what you're talking about.
See, there's no need to push me out of a building.
We'll see what happens. But before we get to my addendum, should we get to today's sponsor?
Yes. Yeah. Today's show is sponsored by Roughneck Scarves. Roughneck Scarves have been investing in our future as a long-time sponsor of the Total Soccer Show. We tweeted out today, if you designed a Roughneck Scarf representing the changes you'd make to American soccer, what would it look like? And oh boy, did we get some answers.
We did. We got a lot of very good answers. This might have been one of my favorite rounds of this type of ad campaign we've ever done. Douglas Cueva says, soccer owners pushing a stadium that is bolted to their city permanently. # save the crew.
That's a great answer. So that's, a resistance to that whole concept of teams being moved around within the league. # save the crew. Go to savethecrew.com. Get involved. Man, I feel like a burger, says. I'm guessing not the real name. The scarf would be invisible because we need more transparency. More transparency. Sorry, I laughed over that line. But it would smell like cinnamon because cinnamon smells great.
So he wants like cinnamon fragrance is essentially, it's like, oh, I've sold you this imaginary scarf.
It's made of invisible cinnamon.
Okay, of course.
Come on, keep up.
All right, so buy some incense, I guess. Grant Babcock. One side would be Eric Winalda with a gas can and matches in front of the United States Soccer Federation headquarters.
Can we just make sure that everybody is cleared out of the building first?
Sure. The reverse side is Julie Foudy and Landon Donovan going over blueprints together.
Oh, for the building they're about to rebuild in its place. Did you see these comments by Eric Winalda? It was with NBC Sports. I think he was talking to Joe Prince Wright. He essentially said, if I was elected US soccer president, which is an actual thing he's trying to do, he would make sure that sort of at the table and involved in decision-making are more soccer people, fewer business people. So he would literally bring in Julie Foudy and Landon Donovan to be sort of part of his board or his people that he's governing with.
Yeah, and that makes total sense to me.
So that's why they've got the blueprints on this.
But I was concerned for a moment because when you said, did I see these comments from Eric Winalda? I was like, did he say he was going to get a gas can and burn the Federation to the ground? Because it's controversial.
He's actually kind of deliberately not saying that, but also kind of saying that.
Yes.
He's got like a gentle restructuring approach. I'm kind of pro Eric Winalda being elected US president right now. US soccer president, excuse me. Although, I don't know. Ryan Wattenbarger says, I don't know, but it would only come in youth size.
Yep.
Yeah.
That works.
Faith in the future.
Justin Herring, it would just be the yarn or fabric completely unraveled so that we could create a new scarf from the ground up.
That's good too. I believe Scott Zawadzki also just sent us a picture of yarn, which I think was hinting at the same thing. Michael Tackett says it would say promotion on one side, relegation on the other. And simple but brilliant.
Yeah, I think we were there. And Mike Kristen says...
He didn't insult anyone when he talked about it. So that's one of the keys to a successful conversation about Pro Rel.
I don't think that's possible. Mike Kristen, it should say never forget 2017 on one side and nothing is guaranteed on the other. I absolutely think that should be a scarf.
That was kind of like to your first point, right?
Yes.
Like always remember that there was a year where we failed to qualify for the World Cup.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't want to say never forget because that would be a very different event. So I'm going to say, I'm trying to think, like, when did we get eliminated? Could we just, like take remember the 5th of November or the 5th of October?
It was the 10th of October.
Remember the 10th of October? That doesn't quite work, so we can't take that from England.
Everyone stay sober the 10th of October. How about that?
Sure.
All right. So Roughneck Scarves is the official provider of scarves for US Soccer, for Major League Soccer, for the NCAA, and for the USL. If you would like to get 20% off any scarf at roughneckscarves.com, use the discount code Total Soccer Show, all one word, even though I paused between Total and Soccer. It's Total Soccer Show, all one word, all uppercase, for 20% off. One scarf you could buy to invest in the future is the Total Soccer Show Hello and Welcome scarf, which I will link to in the show notes. It's a great looking scarf, and 50% of the money goes directly to us, 50% goes to Roughneck Scarves. It's a win-win capitalism situation.
Yeah, and since, as we've established, the head, or in this case heads of U.S. Soccer, get a seat to FIFA meetings and elections and that type of thing, we're going to have to learn how to play the game and take that money. So, maybe you buy a scarf, maybe we listen to you a little bit more when we become U.S. Soccer president. So I'm saying.
Bribe Total Soccer Show by buying the TSS scarf from roughneckscarves.com.
We're already playing the game, baby.
Thank you to Roughneck for sponsoring today's show.
Indeed. Thank you, Roughneck. And I wanted to add on my point to yours, which is that if you want to be a selling league, you got to make that more of a possibility. Right now, I think it's 33% of a player sale. If you're selling a player to a club outside of MLS, the league gets 33% of that. Really not much of an incentive to sell your players if you're only getting 2/3 of their value.
Right. I think you get some of it in allocation money as well, which is kind of not real money in many ways. So I wish I had the specifics of how a transfer in MLS works. I feel like it keeps changing. They keep tweaking the formula a little bit. But essentially, we would tweak the formula all the way to one end where the club/franchise keeps most of the money, or all of the money as revenue.
Yeah, and I have lots of other ideas to go with that. I like the idea of the number of minutes your homegrown players get at the end of the season is like basically you have that correspond to the number of millions that get added to your salary cap.
Wow.
So it's like not like you play 4,000, you get $4 billion, but it's more like, say you combined your homegrown players play 4,500 minutes, that's 4.5 million that you get added onto your salary cap.
All right, so I don't want to repeat too many of the points that are made with Travis Clark. I did a Top Draw Soccer Show episode with him 2 weeks ago where we did a similar show to this, but all about changes to youth development in soccer. And I kind of got fixated on how to maximize homegrown player minutes in Major League Soccer. And one of the ideas I came up with was use it or lose it. So for those who don't know, a homegrown player on the MLS salary cap counts for nothing, right? You pay him and it doesn't count against your salary cap, so it's a great bonus to be able to add to your roster, right? But I would argue that if you have a homegrown player but you're not playing them at all, at some point they get transferred or they're made available to another team under the same terms.
Wow.
So someone else can take advantage of your homegrown player.
The use it or lose it rule.
Use it or lose it rule. Another option you just made me think about is maybe first tiebreaker should be homegrown player minutes.
Ooh.
Instead of games won or goal difference, first tiebreaker in the standings is how many minutes did you give to homegrown players this year, FC Dallas?
So then your idea would be like if Andrew Carlton hasn't gotten more than like 30 minutes over the 10 games, then somebody else can just come in and sign him? Is that how it works?
Yep, under the same terms. Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah. I'm not sure, those aren't the numbers I would use, but something that indicates that this player is playing.
I like the idea of adjusting that a little bit so Andrew Carlton has the freedom. Because you might want to stay and be like, no, I'm with Ben Atlanta.
Yes,
I've been with Atlanta, I like
yeah.
them. But if NYCFC came along and we're like, we'll give you more money and we'll give you some minutes, I'd be like, okay, I'm free to sign for you.
Yeah.
I will do that.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, if we're talking about changes to Major League Soccer, I would change the MLS schedule. I would change the Major League Soccer schedule to line up with the European schedule.
Yeah.
As in, it would start in August, it would end in May. I would take a huge winter break to avoid sort of having the really, really cold months and games in, Massachusetts, for example. And I really think there's a way to balance that out where it's kind of one season, but it's kind of South American as well, like Apertura, Clausura. You don't actually have to have two different separate seasons. You can just take a break and you're stuck on 19 games from... let's say the last week of November, you break and you come back maybe in March.
Wow.
I don't know. I'll take a huge break.
That's a long break, though.
Or maybe there's another way to do it where...
Wait, so then you'd play from March...
to May. That's not enough, is it?
No,
okay, so you come back in February maybe, but you would have to tinker with the schedule so that, for example, New England plays a lot of away games in February until it warms up, right? So I think there are definitely ways to do it. I think the advantage to this is you could comply with international breaks, right? This benefits the US national team specifically if MLS is just on international break when the rest of the world is always on international break. It benefits MLS if the teams do not have to play through the blazing heat of the summer, which is really just the other version of playing in the extreme cold, right? Yeah. MLS is miserable to watch in July and August, especially early August, because it is just like too hot and the pace is slow and everyone is sweating, fans and players alike.
But we know a big part of that is because it doesn't have much competition during those months.
Right.
You don't have NFL, you don't have NBA, you've got baseball in kind of the heart of summer when you're not near the playoffs, so it's not as interesting. Whereas you've got the kind of the fall schedule of sports, which is always going to be competitive. Again, not to continuously go back to him, but Eric Winaldo made the point and somebody was like, but how do you make like your league competitive when you've got all these other things going on? And he was like, do you mean like having the playoffs in the midst of like NFL, NBA, World Series, college football? Like there's lots of other stuff happening right now in the middle of the playoffs. So it's not like it's not already happening.
And there's another major point to the schedule change. And I want to credit Kartik Krishnaiyer with this. You can find him with Neil Blackman on the Yanks Are Coming podcast. I heard him talk about this. He says he's long been a proponent of changing the schedule, mostly so that the transfer windows in America match up with the European transfer windows. And then that makes it easier for American players to go overseas. Right now, we always end up sort of doing this weird thing where maybe players are sold mid-season in MLS to join a Premier League team, or they're sold in January when they haven't been practicing since November, and then they're sort of out of shape or like not sharp when they go. Like if you just were more, if you matched yourself up to the European transfer system a bit better, it would be a lot easier for players to move because your players would be like on break and available when teams are doing their buying.
Yeah.
Put yourself in the shop window at the right time.
And also flip that around because when the MLS windows are open, that doesn't necessarily mean that other leagues have their windows open.
Yes.
And so then if you are, I already mentioned them before, but like if you're Watford and an MLS club comes calling, you might be tempted to sell that player, but if you can't replace them in the same window, then you're never really going to sell that player, or if you do, it's going to be for 3 times the amount that they should cost.
Right, so you join the rest of the world, join the ecosystem, get involved.
Because it ends up being free transfers, and nobody wants that.
There we go.
But we do want
the MLS schedule.
The big brother bureaucratic soccer empire.
All right, tell me about it.
This is my final one, and it's kind of a big one, so bear with me. But it kind of ties in some current problems we have. Number one, there aren't enough like trained, like informed coaches in this country. We don't. I think there's like we talked about this already, but for every coach with an A license, I think that's like one license to 6,000 kids playing soccer. But a big problem with that is that it's so expensive to get those high level licenses, starting with the C, but even the D at like 125. That can be a decent investment or outlay if you're only getting paid like $3,000 a season.
Because you've got to travel to the place where you're doing it. It's a weekend of your time. You might have to book a hotel, etc.
It's not. So it's a huge commitment. So what I have is an idea like Soccer Corps or like Teach Soccer for America,
like an AmeriCorps type.
But it's essentially that you kind of agree.
AmeriCoach.
Yes, and we've had people I like that. We've had people say like I want to get involved. I want to become a coach.
I am available for branding consultations.
Boo. But I like this idea of, say you, Daryl Grove, want to get involved and you want to start coaching soccer, but you've never coached before, you don't have that much like confidence in your abilities. There's also the element of like, but who do you coach? Like, Daryl, you don't have a 6-year-old who's about to start playing soccer, so if you want to get involved...
You saying I should have kids just so I can practice coaching on them?
Or you should buy into the big brother bureaucratic soccer empire.
Okay, so how would it work?
So basically, if you wanted to get your license, you would sign up, and this, basically, you would be allowed to attend these training sessions for free. So you could get your E, your F, E, D, C, B, A, all the way up for free with the agreement that, like, you have to coach. So say you live in Richmond and you want to become a coach. Well, here's this club. They need coaches. That's who you're going to go coach.
So this is like the deal where the government, I think, will pay for your teacher education if you then go and teach in public schools that they say they need teachers at.
Yeah. And that can be even like, you know, if you have a state in the Midwest where you don't have much coaching or many teams, maybe a high school needs a coach. Well, now you can go coach that high school, or you can help start a club if the big brother bureaucratic soccer empire wants to start their own club there.
It needs a rebrand, but yes.
But the BBBSE, that doesn't do it for you? But so basically then it like you are then being sent to places that need certified trained coaches, which is good. But on top of that, the part of the empire aspect of it is that, say, you then report to your superior who reports up and all the way up. So now you are coaching this team, and here's this 10-year-old
so who's also
really,
a scout.
Who's really, really, really good. Well, I'm going to report him. He's going to go to this, and you could even make it to the point where you have like the BBBSE like select championship, which is like all the best players in Virginia are playing all the best teams in players in West Virginia, and then those are showcase events where clubs can come and college coaches can come, and it sort of enfranchises people who otherwise aren't enfranchised by the current system.
Okay, I could get on board with that. I co-sign as co-president.
There we go.
I have a similar-ish idea, which is for US soccer to identify underserved areas in terms of areas that don't have coaches and don't have clubs. And this is sort of because one of the things we haven't said yet is end pay to play. And I think one of the reasons we haven't said end pay to play is because we recognize that that is really, really hard to do. What you're better off doing is just setting up competing structures or set up alternative structures to pay to play. Because honestly, the middle class, richish kids who can afford to pay for pay to play, let them keep doing it, but then set up an alternative that's of equal quality for people who can't pay to play, right?
Well, that's difficult.
So one of the things I would do is to have US soccer funds look for areas that are underserved where we think there's talent. This would take some reconnaissance first, where we think there's talent, but they can't get into the pay-to-play clubs, and go and set up a school that is paid for by US soccer. It's funded externally by a sponsor or just from US soccer funds or something like that. So you're not overhauling the whole system, but you're just setting up little academies here and there that can sort of serve that community.
And I would add with that, like, and
for free, obviously, they would play for free.
And I would say that, you know, a lot of people then wonder, like, well, where does this money come from? How do you finance some of this stuff? And we know already there's the $100 million surplus. What? What, they're going to sponsor all of these things?
I just named a brand. I don't know.
Have you ever drank a Mountain Dew, Daryl Grove? I didn't think. I love it. I had a feeling you had never had one. But I want to say
Cholula hot sauce. Just name the thing that's on our desk.
I mean, and it's delicious and wonderful and way better than most other hot sauces.
Almost empty. We should get some more.
And slightly brown. Interesting.
I think it loses its redness as you get towards the
There
bottom.
we go.
Right, okay, we've been sidetracked.
That's how you know that you have to get a new one. But I will also add this, that part of FIFA's like mandate is to help like grassroots soccer grow and help develop soccer around the world. It's going to be a huge hit for FIFA that the United States is not at the 2018 World Cup.
Yeah.
Not just from, like, obviously not from, like, everybody's tuning in to watch Michael Bradley play, but more so because you have so many Americans traveling.
Big fans of the big diagonal pass in Brazil.
It's going to be fewer people watching. It's going to be fewer people attending. You're not maybe going to get as much sponsorship as they would have liked. Yeah. And I do think that there is sort of an interest on FIFA's part to make soccer a bigger thing in this country.
So you're saying apply for some FIFA funds to then fund these US soccer
Why not?
schools?
I mean, they're around, and you know we've already established that you and I are willing to take bribes to make things happen. So we'll grease some wheels at FIFA.
People would have to buy a lot of TSS scarves to make this happen.
This is true. I don't know. That's true. We could just start selling like Qatar-branded scarves, and it would work out fine.
One idea I had for US soccer, I think we've hit 10 ideas here, so I can easily title the show that now, is to maybe refocus improving the team over improving revenue, right? So things like I no longer want to see friendlies that are then placed at, or even Copa America Centenario games that are placed at the biggest possible venue, and then that means that venue has weird artificial turf and we have to cover it with those sort of rectangles of grass that are barely connected together, and then the US team is having this great experience and playing against, let's say, Argentina. I'm not specifically talking about that semi-final, but I think a friendly maybe, where you're playing this great team and it should be a great experience, but you end up playing on this weird field because it's all made of weird grass that's not proper grass.
Or
not connected grass.
If you want to go with the ultimate example, there was the USA-Mexico game at the Alamo Dome, which was played on like just straight turf that was like bulging up and people were falling over, and it was the worst pitch ever.
But the reason they're doing it is because it's a massive attendance attendance and a huge stadium that you can put it in, but maybe let's just focus on making sure that the field is correct. And obviously we're talking about the men's team here. This goes double for the women's team. Like if I was US soccer president, the US women would never play on turf ever, on artificial turf ever again. If there was a game scheduled for the day after I took over as president, I would spend the 24 hours in between finding another field for that game.
Yeah. So, I do think, to go all the way back to the beginning, there's a phrase when it comes to like screenwriting or like movie making where you have to have like the hero do like hero business, or I forget what it's called, but it's basically
Hero's Journey?
No, I don't think it's more so like say in Sharknado, the obvious example, because that's what comes to mind from How Did This Get Made, is that you have to have your main actor like save the kitten and like get the little girl back inside before the Sharknado comes along. Like you have to have him doing those things.
Save the cat.
Yeah, you have to, exactly. You have to. That's the one. You have to establish that, like, and I think, like, as U.S. soccer president, that's another thing that needs to happen. Is you do need to have those things that establish, like, oh, he's making changes or she's making changes. This is going to be different. No more turf. No more this. This is being done differently. And it's sort of like, oh, okay, like he's doing the things that need to happen to be the hero. All right, I'm in. And that allows you a little bit of that mandate to then be like, oh, and also relegation, promotion, and no salary cap. Let's get to it.
Okay, we are running out of time. You have to get out of here soon to go coach the future. So can I just run through some of my remaining ideas?
You can try. I'll probably talk.
So one of the things is I would establish a US style. We've talked about this before, so maybe we can use shorthand here. But my idea is that the US should just say, we are a counter-attacking team. We will not press high up the field. We will not sit really far back. We will sort of absorb pressure at midfield and then break on you fast. And the key to the US style is we break on you fast. The U17s do it. The U20s do it. Tab Ramos has kind of established this. It's what we were good at under Bob Bradley. It's what we were good at before. I would say from the top down, this is the US style. We are going to do it. I talked about this with George Qureshi and he said, but what about when you play the weaker nations in CONCACAF? And I think I would say that we maybe just twist it a little bit and make it more of a high press, and we break on you fast, but we win the ball higher up the field.
Okay.
How about that?
Here's my question, though.
Yeah.
I'm not even worried about that. My concern would be, to go back to yesterday's show, say Yogi Low comes to U.S. Soccer and says, I want to manage the USA. It's always been my dream. I've just never talked about it ever publicly.
Yeah.
But I don't want to do a counterattacking system or whatever. Like, what do you do then if your coach that you want to hire or you think would be a really good fit doesn't play that system? Because I am kind of resistant to this idea.
So I think Yogi Löw's different, right? Because he's obviously like one of the most celebrated coaches in the world right now. I would say his team's kind of counterattack fast sometimes. He's kind of got different styles for different
He evolves,
games,
and
right?
that's what I think it needs to be, is an evolving approach.
So and this goes to a second point that I wanted to make, is I would set up a new system where if we accept that maybe there isn't an American or MLS coach that we're super pumped about, and I want a tactical coach. Remember, I always want Mourinho because he's a guy who prepares specifically for specific opponents, has a tactical plan and sees it through. Okay, so I would want a tactical coach like that. And then I would want above them, you can call it a technical director, a technical advisor, whatever. And that person is responsible for navigating this new coach through the ins and outs of how the American soccer system works, for one thing. But he's also responsible for sort of overseeing the long-term project of making sure that young players get picked. He would have actual authority or input, at least, into team selection and making sure that we sort of maintain this style between coaches. So each coach is there to do sort of the specific tactics and approach and preparation for each game, but the technical advisor is there for the long term and to sort of make sure that there isn't too much chopping and changing between coaches.
Okay. I'm down for that.
So I'd establish that system and go with that for at least, this is the thing, you've got to stick with it, right? You can't have 3 bad results under this system and then start over with something else. You've got to stick at that for like 10 years.
Next question then.
Yeah.
Do you then extend that to youth level? So if, say, you did have the Big Brother bureaucratic soccer empire, would you then, like, do all of the kids in there have to be taught, like, we play counterattacking style at senior level, so now we're going to learn how to counterattack when you're 12?
I think it's better for regions to have different styles and different teams to have different styles and different coaches to have different styles. But I would go at least as far as saying the U17 national team and the U20 national team and the U23 national team should play that style. And I think it would be encouraged to play that style, but not mandated.
That's a good answer, Mr. President.
Yeah, right? It's a good dodge answer.
Yep.
But I also...
No, you answered that one.
I also really mean it.
No, a dodge answer would have been like, I think that's an interesting question, and it's important that we answer these types of questions because the youth of today are the most important generation and blah, 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 blah.
I got a couple more. You got time?
Sure.
Just about, in the British sense. So the other thing I would do is pay solidarity and training fees so that when you develop a player, you are paid, the club that develops them is paid for that player. Okay? Get that down there.
Down for it.
the final thing is stop mythologizing other countries.
1,000,000% agree.
Stop mythologizing other countries.
Yep.
The kids in Brazil do not all play in the street
Nope.
barefoot with a ball made of like tape and then go straight to the Brazilian national team.
They do
right?
not.
Some kids do that because, there's poverty and some kids are poor and they do that. But the really good kids are picked up by youth academies and trained to play soccer at a high level.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
stop mythologizing Brazil. Stop mythologizing Iceland and say, well, they managed to do it 300,000 people. The answer is it's easier to do it 300,000 people because you only need 23 for a World Cup squad. So it's easier to identify and give high-level training to 23 people when there's only 300,000. It's actually harder when there are 330 million. That's
it's
why
way harder.
China and India are not winning the World Cup because of population size. Because population size doesn't matter.
Yeah, and also when you have like a direct connection to Europe and you have like much more like transition back and forth, so you've got coaches going, you've got players going far more easily than the United States does. I find myself really frustrated by a lot of these things because like we're not going to be Iceland. So like this idea of like Iceland can do it, why can't we? This is so stupid. It's like no, that's apples and oranges. Fruit can be compared, but not in this situation. And especially with Brazil, because number one, like or that kind of idea of like other countries, you just put the ball out and everybody plays, and that's how you learn to play. No, it's not. That's how you learn to run after a ball and be an individual player who does stepovers.
Yep.
It is not how you learn to play in a system, in a team. I've said this many times. It's my belief as to why Freddie Adu hasn't been more successful. It's because I think he's a good individual player who doesn't really know how to play in a tactical system and struggles.
Part of it is he's not fast enough and not strong enough.
Well,
and that's why it's kind of his strengths are outweighed by his weaknesses. You can probably knock him around a little bit.
I mean, that's
right?
definitely true.
Yeah.
But I also think that you have to have that foundation. You have to have those sort of building blocks in place. And to your point, a lot of kids get discovered at a young age in Brazil and then get bought by clubs or bought by agents. And it's like, if you want to like have this beautiful, like idyllic idea of what the Brazil system is, it's incredibly capitalistic and kind of brutal. Like it is selling players on because you're going to make money off of them.
And also, it's not playing in the streets. A lot of it is futsal. If you listen to actual Brazilian players talk about what they did growing up, like Ronaldinho, he'll say, I played futsal. He didn't say, I played in a back alley somewhere. No. He played futsal in an organised like league and a court and, learned some skills that way.
And I think a big part of it, and we do have to go, but I think a big part of it is that you read books of some of these guys, and a lot of them, Pele, Maradona, are from a bygone era. It's a different time. Pele found out he made the Brazil national team for the first time over the radio.
Yeah.
Like he heard the squad announced. It was like, wait, that's my name. Like that's never ever going to happen in this era. And like it is true that's
maybe a podcast.
It could be that they came from like poorer backgrounds.
Yeah.
But it's just to compare like what Pele's
Did Pele
situation
come from
was.
a poor background? I actually don't know that for sure.
I
know Maradona did.
So, or at least in his book, he makes it that way, as does Maradona.
Yeah.
But my point is more so that like just because some Brazilians, Garrincha in the 1950s was playing barefooted when he got discovered, does not mean that every Brazilian player is playing barefooted. Nor does it mean every Argentinian or Chilean, and to me, or African. And I feel like that is sort of what it is at its basis, is kind of like racist or kind of
patronizing.
Patronizing, yeah, it's probably the better way to put it. Racist is too harsh, but it is sort of like, oh, look at these like third worlders and how they just play in their bare feet, and yet they beat us in a World Cup. And it's just like, well, there's a lot more to it than
and
that.
the similar thing with Iceland, right? Like this tiny country, who managed to find 11 people who can play soccer.
One of my favorite stories is that the Icelandic journalist, I think it was, who kept posting like photos of ridiculous places in Iceland and was like, "This is where Gylfi Sigurdsson was born," and people believed it because we have this idea of like, oh, it's this Viking settlement or whatever.
He's the only sort of non-English speaking person I've ever followed on Twitter. I used to translate all his tweets.
But he really did. He would post this like Hobbit-looking house and be like, "This is where like Gudjonsson like was born or had his first child, like the hospital where he was born." And people were like, "Whoa, that's amazing! Iceland is crazy."
So can I wrap all
and
this
that was
up?
fake.
I wrap all this up by saying we should stop mythologizing other countries, stop trying to copy other countries. Like, because even to the point of like saying we should do a DAS reboot.
Yeah.
We shouldn't implement the German system in the United States. We should invent an American sort of refresh that changes things. Right?
Yeah, we just call it the reboot.
It's called Put Your Shoes Back On. And embrace an American style and be confident in it and proud of it. And that means a playing style. It means a style of governing the federation, a style of coaching, a style of like doing coaching so you can go out and teach that to kids. All of that stuff that as US soccer president, we establish all these new things, we get everybody behind it, and then we go and we are proud of it.
Hooray. America.
So vote Daryl and Taylor 2018.
Oh, yeah, we're running, by the way.
We're not really. Obviously, we look forward to people's responses to all this. We actually have a few more ideas, but Taylor really does have to go and coach the future.
Yep.
So I will say, Taylor Rockwell, thank you for taking the time plus about 5 minutes you didn't have to talk to me today.
Right back at you, buddy.
Listeners,
minus the 5-minute thing.
Listeners, thank you for listening. We'll be back tomorrow with a review of the MLS playoffs, and we're going to answer some more listener questions. For those who don't know, it's Chicago versus New York Red Bulls tonight, followed by San Jose versus Vancouver.
I'm excited.
Yeah, we've got the DVR set, right? So we're back in here tomorrow morning to talk about all of that.
We set the DVR when we learned that we had Unimas.
Channel 408 DirecTV, if anyone needs to find it. Listeners,
Richmond.
thank you for listening, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.